somewhere right now, like someone is learning to speak English by reading a textbook dialogue about a teenager named Kevin.
Probably an A1 or A2 level reading exercise.
Yeah, exactly. Just a very basic, simple English conversation between two characters, Mark and Sarah, talking about what they used to be like at school. And according to the text, Kevin used to be this long-haired rebel who played in a band.
The classic teenage rebel
Oh,
archetype.
totally. But today, adult Kevin works in IT, he has a short haircut, and he cheerfully admits his life is, like, totally boring.
I love that, the complete turnaround.
Right. And ironically, that very basic language exercise, the one with Mark and Sarah just chatting, it actually explains more about human psychology, identity, and, well, how our brains edit our memories than, like, a shelf full of neuroscience journals.
It really is a brilliant paradox, honestly. I mean, you look at these conversational practice transcripts, these textbook audio scripts, and on the surface, their only goal is to teach vocabulary or maybe some verb tenses. But to teach a language effectively, the authors actually have to tap into universally understood human experiences.
Which makes sense, because you need the student to relate to the material.
Exactly. So they are accidentally creating this perfect, unfiltered mirror of the human condition.
Which is exactly why we're doing this today.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a bizarrely fascinating stack of transcripts from English language learning materials.
It's a very unique set of sources for us today.
It really is. But for you listening, we're going to look right past the grammar lessons. We're here to extract the psychological blueprints underneath them.
Because there's a lot hiding in plain sight in these basic dialogues.
Exactly. We're going to explore how the labels we wore in school and those incredibly awkward phases we all survived essentially hardwired the adults we are today.
The transition from the schoolyard to adulting.
Right. So get ready, because we're basically holding up a mirror to your own version 1.0 today. Let's unpack this.
To understand the adults we become, we really first have to examine those initial identities we carve out for ourselves. Because school is, arguably, our very first encounter with a complex, kind of unfeeling social hierarchy.
Yeah, it's a terrifying microcosm of society.
It really is.
And the transcripts map this survival strategy out perfectly. Like, I was looking at one dialogue from a Macmillan source that explicitly breaks down those classic school personality types.
Oh, the labels.
Yes. You have the academic, the kid who defines their entire worth by getting good grades.
Right.
Then the sporty kid who is just constantly in motion, the joker, and of course the rebel, like our guy Kevin with his garage band.
The ones trying so hard to look cool.
Exactly. But what caught my eye was how the lesson actually used these stereotypes to teach a specific vocabulary concept. It was a breakdown of the phrase, I used to versus getting used to.
Which is actually a profoundly philosophical grammar point when you think about it.
Is it? Because, see, I initially read it as just a lesson on giving up. Like, I used to play guitar, but I quit. It felt like this linguistic graveyard of failed hobbies.
Well, yeah, that's a very common interpretation. But linguistically and psychologically, it's not really about failure. It's about compartmentalization.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, when we say I used to be a rebel, we are using language to build a fence around a past version of ourselves. It describes a closed chapter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it basically tells the brain, hey, that entity is entirely separate from who I am right now.
Right. Whereas the phrase getting used to implies active friction, like I am getting used to waking up early. It's that messy, uncomfortable process of adaptation.
Exactly. It's an ongoing struggle, and we rely heavily on I used to when talking about our school days because it helps us kind of distance ourselves from the chaos of adolescence.
That makes total sense. But it makes me wonder about those original labels. Were those early identities, the academic, the sporty kid, the rebel, were they ever actually our real personalities?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah. Because it seems to me they were just like costumes we put on to figure out who we were.
Well, I wouldn't call them costumes per se.
No.
No, because a costume implies a conscious temporary choice, like putting on a hat for a Halloween party, right?
Yeah, true.
Teenagers aren't fully conscious of why they are adopting these roles. It is basically an unconscious survival mechanism. Remember, the adolescent brain is undergoing this massive neurological remodeling.
Right, the pruning thing.
Yes, the synaptic pruning happening during those years is violent. Emotionally, socially, biologically, teenagers are in a state of chaos. So adopting a rigid, extreme stereotype provides this desperately needed illusion of control.
Okay, so if it's not a costume, maybe it's more like a software firewall.
A firewall. I like that.
Yeah, like you look back at version 1.0 of yourself with the spiked hair or the heavy black eyeliner, the band t-shirts, and you cringe.
Oh, deeply cringe.
Right. But that extreme rebel persona wasn't actually a personality. It was a firewall meant to keep the system safe from social rejection while your actual emotional operating system was, compiling in the background.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. That extreme label provides an immediate tribe. It dictates your peer group, your uniform, your weekend activities. Everything is decided for you.
It takes the guesswork out of socializing.
Precisely. Nuance requires a level of cognitive and emotional security that teenagers simply haven't developed yet. So the firewall protects them until they are stable enough to handle the complexities of the real world.
But, I mean, a firewall can only protect a developing system for so long before it has to actually interact with reality, right?
Right. And that is exactly where those rigid labels start to break down.
Yeah.
You can't stay the rebel or the academic forever without the real world testing those boundaries.
And that collision between aspiration and limitation, that's where the real growth happens. It is the beginning of the messy middle.
Oh, the messy middle. It's an awkward time.
It is brutal. One of the conversational transcripts from the Daily Dialogue source had this highly relatable moment where a speaker talks about their childhood dream of being an astronaut.
A very common version 1.0 dream.
Oh, for sure. They were completely obsessed with space.
Yeah.
But then they hit high school math.
Ah, the great equalizer.
Yeah. They realized their brains simply did not compute calculus, which is pretty hard deal breaker for NASA.
Yeah, NASA tends to be strict about math. It is basically the brain's first encounter with its own hard limits.
Right. And there was another student in the dialogues who wanted to be a veterinarian, which sounds incredibly noble, until they described practicing their early medical exams on the very patient family dog, Biscuit.
Oh, poor Biscuit.
Yeah, using a plastic toy stethoscope. It really highlights that massive gap between the fantasy of an identity and the actual mechanics of it.
But what's fascinating is how fierce the defense of those identities can be before they inevitably shift. The real English Pod transcripts bring up the intense tribalism of teenage musical tastes.
Oh my gosh, yes.
The cultural divide between loving, say, boy bands versus grunge bands.
Oh, people would defend their favorite band like they were defending a family member.
Absolutely.
Like, I always thought it was just kids being dramatic, but why were we so fiercely loyal to something as trivial as a band?
Because of that neural pruning we mentioned earlier. At that age, your brain is literally deciding which neural pathways to keep and which to discard based on your environment.
Wow, so it's biological.
Entirely.
Wow.
What you listen to isn't just background noise, it is a profound declaration of your values. The tribe you choose, whether it's grunge or pop or punk, it dictates the social interactions that reinforce your developing brain structure.
That is wild.
So, to attack a teenager's favorite band is, neurobiologically speaking, to attack their developing sense of self.
Wow. So when that firewall fails,
Yeah.
or when your identity gets challenged, it's not just embarrassing, it feels catastrophic.
It feels like the end of the world.
Which means we have to talk about the note passing incident.
Oh, yes, the classic note pass.
There's a story in one of the reading comprehension exercises that genuinely, made my stomach drop in sympathy. A student was passing a note to a friend during a test.
High-stakes environment.
Exactly. And the note simply said, "I hate this test. It is so boring."
A classic high-risk, low-reward maneuver.
Right. And of course, the teacher intercepts the note, the teacher unfolds it, and reads it out loud to the entire silent classroom.
Oh, a truly catastrophic social event for a young brain.
It's a nightmare. And the lesson actually uses this exact story to teach the difference between the words mortified and nostalgic.
Two very important vocabulary words.
Yeah, they define mortified as being so extremely embarrassed you want to physically disappear through the floor.
Which is exactly how that student felt.
Oh, undoubtedly. And then nostalgic is that warm, slightly sad affection for the past. But how do we get from one to the other? How do we survive being mortified? Is it just the old cliche that tragedy plus time equals comedy?
Well, it's much more active than simply waiting for time to pass. Time doesn't just pass, it edits.
What do you mean by it edits?
Okay, so when that note is read aloud, the brain experiences an intense spike in cortisol. That's a stress hormone. It registers as a genuine threat to survival because, to a social creature like us, social exile is dangerous.
Or you're being cast out of the tribe.
Exactly. But over 15 years, through a process called memory reconsolidation, Every time you recall that painful memory in a safe environment, your brain rewrites it slightly.
So it's like saving over a file.
Basically, yes. The cortisol response decays over time. Eventually, the emotional sting vanishes, leaving only the narrative structure of the event. It becomes a nostalgic anecdote. It becomes part of your personal mythology.
That is so cool. So our brains are actively soothing us by turning our worst moments into funny stories for dinner parties.
In a way, yes.
But if the brain is constantly editing our history, who is deciding what makes the final cut? Because, I mean, we didn't navigate those awkward phases entirely alone.
No, definitely not. We don't grow up in a vacuum. We are shaped by the developmental scaffolding around us, the external forces that anchored us.
And the transcripts highlight this beautifully. When the adults in these language exercises look back, they don't remember the syllabus. They remember specific people.
The individuals who made an impact.
Exactly. There was Mr. Henderson, the art teacher, who saw a frustrated kid and taught them that art is about expression, not perfection.
A vital lesson for a teenager.
And there was Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, who handed a student a book outside of class, and she became the very first person to make them believe they could actually be a writer.
Or Mr. Benson, making science feel like magic. Notice the specificity of those moments. They aren't recalling a routine Tuesday afternoon math class. They are recalling a flashpoint of validation.
And it wasn't just teachers either. It was peers crossing massive boundaries. There's an amazing story in one of the Everyday English Academy listening modules about a third grader meeting a new student named Carlos.
Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah. Carlos had just moved from Mexico and spoke almost no English. But they became best friends anyway. They communicated purely through hand gestures, drawing pictures, and laughing.
It proves that a shared vocabulary isn't the prerequisite for deep human connection.
It really does.
Yeah.
But here is my question. Why do these specific moments stick? Like, why do we vividly remember the exact words an English teacher said 20 years ago? Or the feeling of pride when a friend understands our weird hand gestures, but we literally cannot remember what we had for dinner 3 days ago?
It comes down to how memory is encoded on a chemical level. Memory is not a filing cabinet where every day gets an equal-sized folder.
Okay.
Core memories are forged almost entirely through emotional resonance. When a teacher tells you your writing is brilliant, or when you finally connect with a friend across a language barrier, your brain experiences a sudden surge of neurotransmitters, specifically dopamine and adrenaline.
Like a chemical alert system.
Precisely. That chemical spike acts like a biological highlighter pen.
Well, I like that. A biological highlighter.
Yeah, it marks that specific sensory input and tells the hippocampus, keep this, do not delete this, it is vital for our identity. Routine events like eating dinner or sitting on a bus, they lack that chemical highlighter, so they just fade into background noise. We are quite literally constructed from our most emotionally highlighted moments.
We are a collection of our emotional highlighters. That is amazing.
Yeah.
But it also means those highlighters can be controlled by the era we grew up in, right?
Absolutely. Environment plays a huge role.
Yeah, because there's a fascinating audio clip from Luke's English podcast that we reviewed, where a man reads his mother's actual report card from 1957.
Right, from when she was 8 years old.
Yeah, and the teacher wrote things like, needs to concentrate and poor spelling. But the mother's reflection on it is what really stands out. She describes being raised under this strict Victorian ideal that children should be seen and not heard. She was trained to be a people pleaser.
Which demonstrates how societal environments dictate where the highlighter pen is allowed to be used. For a young girl in 1957, blending in, being quiet, and not making a fuss was the ultimate metric of success. Her brain was rewarded with safety for suppressing her individuality.
That is so sad, but it makes perfect sense.
And that shapes a developing personality fundamentally differently than, say, a modern environment that constantly rewards self-expression.
It's incredible how much invisible architecture goes into building a person. So we've survived the school labels, our firewalls have been tested by the messy middle, our memories have been highlighted by our mentors and our generation.
The foundation is set.
Right. And that brings the timeline up to the present, the fully compiled operating system. Welcome to adulthood.
The grand prize.
Right. So how do the former long-haired rebels, the note passers, and the kids who wanted to go to space handle the reality of paying taxes?
Well, according to the transcripts, they handle it with a bizarre mix of deep appreciation and profound exhaustion.
It is the ultimate paradox. The dialogues describe the modern adult experience as this constant tug of war between ultimate freedom and mundane responsibility.
It really is.
The trade-off is summarized perfectly in one of the sources.
Mm.
You have the total freedom to eat a giant bowl of sugary cereal for dinner in your messy apartment. Nobody's going to stop you.
It's the dream.
It is, but you also have to pay the electricity bill so you can actually see the cereal.
Autonomy always comes with an invoice.
That is so true. And the daily struggle starts the absolute second you wake up. There is a breakdown of the morning routine in these texts that honestly felt like a personal attack.
We all know the routine.
The alarm goes off, you hit snooze, you have a full strategic negotiation with your heavy blanket, questioning if you really truly need to be a participating member of society today.
The blanket usually puts up a strong argument.
It really does. And then you fall into what the text calls the morning scroll trap.
Ah, yes, the great modern psychological hazard.
You grab your phone, you start scrolling for 5 minutes, and suddenly you're comparing your messy cereal for dinner life to everybody else's highly curated, heavily filtered highlight reel.
Right, the highlight reel.
Nothing in your actual physical room has changed, but your mood is completely ruined for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
It's incredibly relatable, but why does it feel so draining? Why does just looking at a screen make us feel so heavy?
Because it exposes a fundamental shift in cognitive load that happens when we become adults. In childhood, your primary job was experiencing life.
Just living it.
Right. You were constantly encountering novel situations, generating those dopamine spikes and creating core memories. But in adulthood, your primary job shifts to managing life.
Experiencing versus managing. That's a huge difference.
Yes, the adult brain is constantly running background logistics. When is rent due? Did I buy groceries? What's the weather going to be? And when you introduce the morning school trap, you are taking a brain that is already managing a heavy logistical load, and you're forcing it to process hundreds of disparate pieces of social information in rapid succession.
Oh, wow.
It hijacks the dopamine system that used to highlight core memories, replacing it with cheap, empty validation.
Which perfectly explains the vocabulary they use for this section. The dialogues define what it means to feel overwhelmed, having simply too much to handle.
A very common adult feeling.
Yeah. And they also define the word cluttered. Like, we usually use cluttered for a physical space, right? Like a messy garage. But here, they apply to the mind. A cluttered mind.
Exactly. A cluttered mind is a mind where the cognitive bandwidth is entirely maxed out by management tasks. It leaves zero processing power for actual novel experiences.
It's just full of chores.
Right. And it's why time seems to speed up as we get older. When you aren't creating new highlighted memories, the years just blur together.
There is a really deep conflict here, beyond just paying bills and fighting the alarm clock. The texts touch on this quiet tension between practicality and our old dreams.
It's a very poignant theme.
Yeah, it's described as living between the sensible voice that says, be careful, make the practical choice, and that quiet question you ask yourself when you're alone in the car. Am I actually living the life I chose, or just the life I ended up in?
The midlife whisper.
Exactly. So I have to ask, if adulthood requires so much management, does that mean we just have to kill off version 1.0 completely? Do we have to abandon the rebel or the astronaut inside us just to survive?
Not at all. Killing version 1.0 is basically a recipe for a midlife crisis.
Okay, good to know.
The goal isn't to destroy your past identity. The goal is integration. Practicality and dreams don't have to be enemies.
Okay.
It's not a binary choice between being, a rigid, responsible adult or acting recklessly like a teenager. The objective is to negotiate a better relationship between your responsibilities and your fundamental nature.
But how do we actually do that when the mind is so cluttered with rent and emails and everything else?
By establishing daily anchors, the linguistic sources suggest that staying true to yourself isn't about grand, sweeping life changes.
Like quitting your job and moving to a cabin.
Right, you don't need to do that. It's about finding small, grounding routines that intentionally reduce the cognitive load. It might be a quiet evening cup of tea without any screens, or sitting on a balcony physically reading a printed book, or just having a focused conversation with a friend.
So just unplugging.
Basically. These aren't just breaks, they are deliberate acts of decluttering. They lower the logistical noise just enough so that your original self, the rebel, the astronaut, the artist, has enough quiet space to breathe.
Wow. It's not about escaping your adult life. It's about building an adult life that actually has a designated room for the things that matter to you.
Beautifully put.
Okay, let's take a breath and bring this all together. We have gone on quite an unexpected journey today, courtesy of some very basic English grammar lessons.
We certainly have.
We started at the starting line, looking at those rigid labels we use as firewalls in school. The academics, the sporty kids, and Kevin the Rebel playing in his garage band.
Our version 1.0 firewalls.
Exactly. And then we transition through the messy middle, surviving the collision of our childhood dreams with reality, fiercely defending our grunge bands, and waiting for time to magically edit our mortifying moments into nostalgic comedy.
The great editor of time.
Right. We examined the teachers and friends who used emotional highlighters to literally wire our brains. And finally, we arrived at the cluttered, overwhelming reality of adulthood, where we are constantly fighting the cognitive load of managing life while desperately trying to carve out quiet moments to just experience it again.
It is the universal human trajectory. And it's beautifully and kind of accidentally captured by materials designed simply to help people communicate.
So for you listening, I want you to pause and reflect on your own used to statements today.
Yeah.
What did you used to do? What did you used to wear? Who did you used to be?
Think about those old labels.
Yeah. And more importantly, how much of that version 1.0 firewall is still quietly operating in the background of your life right now?
It is an exercise well worth your time. The past isn't just something you leave behind, it's the foundation you're currently standing on.
Which leaves us with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. We started this deep dive by talking about finding an old physical school photo buried in a closet. That fading piece of paper that reminds us of our awkward phases.
Right.
But think about the children growing up right now. They aren't going to have a few blurry, fading photos hidden in a shoebox. Their entire version 1.0, every awkward phase, every mortifying thought, every shifting identity is being meticulously documented and permanently stored in high definition on the internet.
That is a terrifying thought.
It really is. Their digital footprint is unerasable. If our brains rely on the passage of time to edit and blur our painful memories into harmless nostalgia, how is the next generation's psychology going to adapt when their awkward past refuses to fade? How do you grow out of an identity when the internet never lets you forget it? Something to mull over. Until next time.